The twin moons hung low in the night sky, their silver light spilling over the tall walls of the royal city. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain and the distant hum of the defense shields that guarded the capital. From the landing platform, Captain Orion Vale could see the city's skyline, towers of glass and crystal rising above narrow streets, their lights dimmed after curfew. It had been 3 long years since he last walked these streets. 3 years since the night flames lit the horizon, enemy ships swarmed the skies, and he made the promise that had carried him through every battle since. He still remembered her standing on the palace balcony, silver hair catching the firelight, her bright alien eyes fixed on him. The evacuation alarms had been screaming, and the enemy bombardment had shaken the ground beneath their feet. But when he shouted, "I will return for you," her answer had been a steady, fearless nod, the kind only someone with true courage could give. Now he was here, older, harder, a few scars on his face, and a weight in his chest from the war that no one could see. And in his coat pocket, he carried more than his promise, a small metal case, cool to the touch, holding a ring unlike any other. The band had been forged from the alloy of his old ship's hull, the vessel that had carried him through hell and back. The stone at its center was a rare crystal mined only from the deep caves of her world, its glow faint but alive, like it held a piece of the planet's heart. Finding it had taken him across hostile space and into places even the Navy avoided. The spaceport was busy, but not as noisy as he remembered. Merchants still called out their goods, but their voices were softer. Soldiers moved in pairs, their armor gleaming but their expressions tired. Peace had come, but it was fragile. Orion stepped through the market, ignoring the stares his human uniform attracted. He passed stalls selling glowing fruit, alien spices, and weapons carved from bone. Every sound, every scent, was familiar yet different. Like a dream of a place he once knew but couldn't fully return to, the palace gates were guarded by 2 tall warriors with shimmering scaled skin. Their spears hummed faintly with energy, and their eyes studied him without blinking. "You have no appointment," one said, his voice deep and resonant. "I'm here to see Princess Elora," Orion replied. The guard tilted his head slightly. "And who are you to her?" Orion's answer was steady. "Someone who kept his word." The guards exchanged a silent glance before one finally stepped aside. "You may pass, but understand, cause trouble and you will not leave alive." Inside, the gardens were quiet, lit by soft lights under the leaves of tall crystal trees. Petals glowed faintly in the moonlight, and the air smelled of water from the fountain scattered through the grounds. Every step Orion took was careful, not out of fear, but because he knew this was sacred ground to her people. He followed the eastern path, the one he remembered from years ago. It curved past a reflecting pool and a carved archway, then opened to a high balcony that looked out over the silver river. And there she was. Her back was to him at first, her long silver hair moving with the breeze. She wore a flowing gown that shimmered faintly, small threads of light woven into fabric. She stood tall, her hands resting lightly on the balcony rail. "Elora," Orion said softly. She turned, her bright eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise. "Orion," she whispered, his name like a memory she wasn't sure was real. He stepped forward, the corners of his mouth lifting into a faint smile. "I told you I'd come back." She took a slow step toward him, but her gaze fell to his hand as he pulled a small case from his coat. "What is that?" she asked. He opened it, and the crystal at the center of the ring glowed softly, casting a warm light between them. Before she could speak, a low, resonant bell rang from deep inside the palace. It was a signal for unauthorized presence detected. Her expression changed instantly, surprise fading into concern. "You shouldn't be here. If the court sees you—" "I made a promise," he said, closing the case and slipping it back into his coat. "And I intend to keep it." The sound of boots echoed from the garden path behind him, steady, fast, and getting closer. Elora's eyes darted toward the noise, then back to him. "If you want to live, you have to go. Now." He shook his head. "Not without you." For a long second, she held his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Then she nodded once sharply. "Follow me." and together they turned away from the balcony and into the shadowed garden paths, with the echo of armored boots closing in behind them. The boots were getting closer, the sound of armor clinking with every step. Orion followed Elora down the balcony steps, the glow from the twin moons fading as the path took them under the shadow of tall crystal trees. The air smelled of damp leaves and night flowers, but neither of them slowed. Elora's gown brushed the path behind her as she moved quickly, keeping low where the light from the lanterns was weakest. "They'll search the gardens first," she whispered. "If we're quick, we can reach the servants' gate before they close the inner locks." Orion nodded but didn't speak. He could hear patrol fanning out, voices calling the alien tongue, the sound bouncing off the garden walls. They turned a corner and slipped behind a row of tall hedges. The leaves rustled softly, masking their footsteps for a moment. Through a gap in the hedge, Orion saw 2 guards pass, their visors glowing faint blue, scanning the ground. Elora pressed her back to the hedge, breathing slowly. "You still carry yourself like a soldier," she murmured. "You haven't changed." He gave a small, quick smile. "I promised you I'd come back. That kind of promise doesn't fade." The moment didn't last. A shout rang out from somewhere behind them. They'd been spotted. Elora didn't hesitate. "This way," she said, breaking into a run down a narrow path lined with statues of ancient kings. Their carved eyes seemed to follow as the 2 of them raced past. The path opened into a courtyard lit by a single fountain. The water sparkled under the moonlight, but Orion didn't have time to admire it. 2 more guards entered from the opposite archway, blocking the way forward. Orion's hand went to the small blaster under his coat. He didn't fire, not yet, but the movement was enough to make the guards stop and raise their own weapons. "Stay behind me," he said. "No," Ella replied firmly. "We move together." Before the guards could react, Elora darted toward the fountain, using its curved edge as cover. Orion followed, and in the same motion, he fired 2 quick shots into the stone tiles at the guard's feet. The blast sent up shards and sparks, forcing the guard to step back. They sprinted past, into another corridor of the garden. Orion could hear the shouts growing again behind them. The whole patrol was converging. The servants' gate was close now, a small iron door set into the outer wall, half hidden behind a flowering vine. Elora reached it first, pressing her hand to the lock plate. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the panel glowed faintly, recognizing her royal imprint, and the latch clicked. They slipped through into a narrow service lane outside the palace grounds. The stone was rougher here, the walls high but unlit. The air smelled faintly of the river, and Orion could feel the city just beyond. They didn't stop moving until they reached a shaded archway where the lane split. Only then did Elora slow, turning to face him. "You came back in the middle of the night, without the court's blessing," she said quietly. "And you brought a ring?" Orion reached into his coat, pulling out the small case again. The crystal inside glowed softly, casting light over both of them. "This was never about the court," he said. "It was about us, about the promise I made." Her eyes searched his, and for a moment the noise of pursuit seemed far away. But reality returned with the faint sound of armored boots on stone. They had been followed even here. Elora snapped the case shut and pushed it back into his hand. "We can't stop now. If they find us, the ring won't matter. Neither will your promise." Orion nodded once. "Then lead the way." They turned down the darker lane, the sound of the city growing louder ahead. And somewhere, past the markets and the alleys, safety waited if they could reach it first. The service lane emptied into a narrow, sloping alley that smelled faintly of damp stone and river mist. Elora kept her pace quick but silent, her head turning often to check the shadows behind them. Orion followed close, one hand near the small blaster under his coat. Beyond the alley, the sound of the city grew louder, the low murmur of night markets still open, the rattle of cart wheels, the soft music of street performers. It might have sounded peaceful to anyone else, but Orion felt only the tight knot of tension in his chest. "They'll send more than guards now," Elora murmured without looking back. "The court has allies in the city. Some won't wear uniforms, They stepped into a wider street lined with shuttered shops and dim lanterns. The glow of the palace still lit the sky behind them, but here the light was weaker, the air heavier. Orion scanned the corners, the rooftops, the dark doorways. He had walked through enough war zones to know when eyes were watching, and they were watching now. A figure emerged from a shadowed doorway ahead, a broad-shouldered man in patched armor, carrying a long staff tipped with a blade. Two more appeared from the opposite side of the street, both with rough, mismatched gear that wasn't standard guard issue. Elora stopped, her voice low. "They're not palace soldiers." "No," Orion agreed quietly, "but they're here for you." The man with the staff smiled without warmth. "Princess, you've been hard to find." "I wasn't trying to be found," she replied sharply. "That's a shame," the man said, "because there are people who'd pay well to know you're walking around without an escort." Orion stepped between them, his stance steady. "You'll have to go through me." The man's smile widened. "That could be arranged." The first swing of the staff came fast, a blur in the dim light. Orion ducked, stepping in close to shove the man back, the strike missing his head by inches. One of the others moved toward Elora, but she grabbed a loose length of wood from a crate and swung hard, catching him across the arm. The crack of impact made him drop his weapon with a snarl. Orion's blaster cleared his coat in a single motion. He fired a shot into the ground between the man's boots, sparks flying up from the stone. "Walk away," he warned. For a second, it seemed like they might listen. But then the leader's eyes flicked to the ring case in Orion's coat pocket, and greed lit his face. "Or we take that too." The choice was made. Orion's next shot hit the man's staff, the blast sending it clattering to the stones. The other two stepped back, weapons lowered, the fight gone from their eyes. "You're making dangerous enemies," the leader growled. Orion didn't flinch. "I've had worse." He grabbed Elora's hand, and they moved quickly down a side street, putting distance between themselves and the mercenaries. The lanes grew narrower, the buildings closer, until the city opened again near the river. The water reflected the moonlight in shifting silver lines, and the sound of it filled the air. Elora stopped beside an old stone arch half covered in vines. "This way. There's a shrine by the water. No one goes there after dark. Too many stories about spirits." Orion gave a brief nod. "Spirits I can handle. People with weapons, not so much." They slipped through the arch and into the overgrown path beyond. The city noises faded behind them, replaced by the rush of the river and the creak of old wood in the wind. Elora glanced at him as they walked. "You came back with a ring. You risked your life to bring it here." "Why?" "Because the promise I made wasn't just about returning," Orion said quietly. "It was about building something that could last, something more than war." Her eyes softened for a moment, but then she looked ahead, toward the shadowed shape of the shrine. "Then we'll need to survive the night first." And together, they disappeared into the darkness by the river. The path to the shrine was narrow and uneven, roots breaking through the stone steps. The vines that covered the archway overhead hung low, brushing their shoulders as they passed. The moonlight struggled to reach here, blocked by the thick canopy of trees along the riverbank. The shrine itself appeared at the end of the path, a small, ancient structure made of dark stone, its walls etched with faded carvings. Two broken lanterns hung by the entrance, swaying gently in the breeze. The air here felt cooler, heavier, as if the place carried the weight of centuries. Elora stepped forward first, her voice low. "No one comes here at night. They say the spirits of the river guard it." Orion glanced around, his instinct sharp. "I've met enough living enemies to know the dead aren't the real problem." They crossed the threshold, the floor inside covered in dust except for a narrow path of disturbed footprints. Orion stopped, crouching to examine them. "These are fresh." Elora's eyes narrowed. "Then we're not alone." A shadow shifted in the far corner of the shrine. From the darkness, a figure stepped forward, tall, lean, wearing a worn travel cloak. The hood fell back, revealing a face Orion knew well. "Corinne," Orion said, his voice edged with disbelief. The man gave a faint smirk. "You're hard to track, Captain. 3 years gone, and you returned not to your fleet, but here with her." Elora looked between them. You know him? Orion nodded slowly. We served together once. Before he decided the war was an opportunity to sell his loyalty to the highest bidder. Corinne chuckled. You make it sound so cold. Old friend, I prefer to call it survival. His gaze dropped to the small case in Orion's coat. I hear you brought something valuable. Something worth far more than the princess's hand. Elora's tone was sharp. This ring is not for sale. Corinne stepped closer, his voice almost casual. Everything is for sale, especially when half the city wants you both gone. The court won't protect you, and your human friends are too far away. Give me the ring, and I might let you leave. Orion shifted his stance, keeping Elora behind him. You'll have to take it from me. The smirk faded from Corinne's face. That can be arranged. From outside the shrine, the faint crunch of boots on gravel reached them. Corinne's voice lowered. Looks like the court's dogs found you anyway. I could hand you over, or I could help you, for a price. Elora's eyes locked on Orion's. He can't be trusted. Orion agreed, but the sound of approaching guards was getting closer. He had to make a decision, and fast. Corinne, he said evenly, you get us out of here alive, and I'll decide what you've earned after. Corinne smiled faintly. Fair enough. He moved toward a narrow side door hidden behind a curtain of vines. This way. And be quick. They'll surround us if we stay. They followed him out into a hidden path that ran parallel to the river. The current glimmered under the moonlight, and the sound of water covered the noise of their steps. Orion kept one hand near his blaster, never letting Corinne out of sight. Beside him, Elora whispered, When this is over, you'll have to choose. Keep the promise you made to me, or let him walk away. Orion's answer was steady. I already know my choice. But first we survive the night. And with the shouts of guards fading behind them, the three figures slipped deeper into the shadows along the riverbank, toward whatever danger waited next. The hidden path ran along the riverbank, twisting between tall reeds and old stone walls. Moonlight shimmered on the water, but most of the trail lay in shadow. Corinne moved ahead with quiet confidence, his boots barely making a sound on the damp ground. Orion kept Elora close, his eyes scanning the trees and the city wall to their left. Where does this lead? He asked. Somewhere the court won't look, Corinne said without turning. Smuggler routes. I've used them for years. They're older than the palace itself. The air was damp here, carrying the scent of river mud and wild herbs. Insects hummed in the reeds, masking the faint sound of their footsteps. But Orion's instinct stayed sharp. This was too easy. They came to a narrow stone bridge crossing a side channel of the river. Beyond it, the land rose to a cluster of abandoned warehouses, their roofs sagging and windows dark. Corinne stopped at the far side of the bridge, glancing back. Rest here a moment. You both look like you could use a breath. Orion didn't sit. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice low. What's your game, Corinne? You didn't risk yourself just out of kindness. Corinne's smirk returned. You always could see through people. Fine, I have my reasons. There's a man in the city who owes me, and he owes the court even more. I plan to cash in on that. You two are my ticket. Elora's expression hardened. You're using us as leverage. Corinne shrugged. Leverage keeps people alive. And right now, you need me more than I need you. The sound of distant boots on stone echoed from upriver. The guards were still searching. Orion clenched his jaw but said nothing. For now, they had to keep moving. They passed through the warehouses, the wood creaking under their weight. Faint moonlight streamed to the holes in the roof, painting pale stripes on the floor. Corinne stopped at a half-collapsed wall and slipped through, leading them into a narrow alley between leaning buildings. It opened into a small courtyard with a single lantern burning beside a door. This is it, Corinne said. My friend's place. He can get us new papers and a safe route out of the city. Elora didn't move. And the cost? Corinne smiled. Everything has a cost, princess. But we'll discuss that inside. The door creaked open, revealing a man in a simple tunic, his face lined but his eyes sharp. Corinne, he said slowly, you bring trouble to my door again. This is profitable trouble, Corinne replied. Let us in. The man's gaze shifted to Orion and Elora, lingering on her. After a moment, he stepped aside. Inside, the room was dim but warm, lit by a single lamp. Maps covered one wall, marked with trade routes and border crossings. On the table sat a stack of forged documents and a set of metal identity tags. The man gestured to the table. These can get you past the city gates. After that, you're on your own. Corinne leaned against the wall. You hear that? Safe passage. All we need is for you to agree to my terms. Orion's voice was cold. Which are? Corinne's eyes glinted. Half the value of that ring you're carrying. You keep the piece, I take the gem. We all walk away alive. Elora's hands tightened into fists. That ring is not for trade. It's a promise. Promises, Corinne said, don't open gates. Before Orion could answer, the sound of boots came again. Closer this time, outside in the street. The man at the table swore under his breath. They found you. You have minutes, maybe less. Orion drew his blaster, his voice firm. Then we move without your terms. Corinne's smirk faded, but he didn't argue. Fine. Follow me. But remember, Captain, favors like this don't come free. They slipped out the back door into another maze of alleys, the shouts of guards growing louder behind them. The city gates, and the choice between freedom and betrayal, waited somewhere ahead. The narrow alleys twisted like a maze, the stone walls damp with river mist. Corinne led quickly, his movements sharp and certain, while Orion kept Elora close behind him. The shouts of guards echoed off the walls, sometimes closer, sometimes farther, always moving. Elora's voice was low but urgent. There's only one main gate they'll expect us to use. If it's blocked, we'll have no time to find another. Corinne didn't slow. I have another way, but it's risky. Orion's eyes narrowed. How risky? Corinne glanced over his shoulder, his smirk returning for a brief moment. Risky enough that you'll either thank me or curse my name for the rest of your life. They reached a wider street lit by tall iron lamps. Ahead, the city's outer wall rose high and unbroken, the massive main gate in the center. Even from here, Orion could see the rows of guards in formation, the gleam of their weapons and the faint hum of the energy shield across the opening. There's no way through that, Elora said quietly. That's why we're not going through. Corinne replied. He turned sharply into a side passage that sloped downward, the air growing colder. The sound of rushing water became louder with each step. The tunnel ended at a grated arch where the city's river channel flowed under the wall. A narrow service walkway ran alongside the water, slick with moss. This leads under the gate, Corinne explained. It's not meant for people, but if we're fast, we can make it before the floodgates open. Elora frowned. And if the floodgates open while we're inside? Corinne's smirk faded. Then we drown. Orion looked at the fast-moving water, then at the narrow path. Move. We don't have a choice. They slipped inside, boots echoing softly on the stone. The tunnel was long and dim, lit only by the moonlight spilling through narrow grates above. The sound of the river filled their ears, the current rushing hard and relentless beside them. Halfway through, a deep metallic clang echoed from behind. Orion turned to see shapes moving at the far end. Guards, their visors glowing in the dark. They found us, Elora whispered. Run, Orion barked. They ran along the narrow walkway, the water splashing against the stone. The tunnel curved slightly, and faint light glowed ahead, the outlet beyond the wall. But just before they reached it, another clang came, this time from in front of them. More guards appeared at the outlet, blocking the exit. We're trapped, Elora said, her voice tight. Not yet, Corinne said, and without warning, he jumped into the river. The current caught him instantly, sweeping him toward the grates. He grabbed hold of the side ladder and shouted back, There's a maintenance hatch here, underwater. Follow me. Orion looked at Elora. It's the only way. She nodded, and together they dropped into the cold water. The current tried to pull them apart, but Orion kept hold of her wrist as they kicked toward the hatch Corinne had pointed to. Corinne was already there, pulling the heavy metal latch. With a loud creak, it opened just enough for them to slip through into a narrow, rising shaft. They climbed until the sound of the river faded and the air grew warmer. At the top, Corinne pushed open another hatch, and suddenly they were outside the wall, the open plain stretching under the pale light of the moons. They climbed out, dripping and breathing hard. Corinne leaned against a rock, grinning. "See? I told you I'd get you through." Orion didn't smile. "You also almost got us killed." Elora stood between them, her voice steady. "We're outside, but the court won't stop. They'll send riders. We have to keep moving." Orion nodded. "Then we head for the hills. By dawn, we'll be beyond their reach." And with the wall of the city fading behind them, the three of them disappeared into the night, knowing the final decision between trust and betrayal was close. The hills were quiet except for the soft rustle of grass in the night wind. Beyond them, the pale glow of the city walls was fading, swallowed by distance and darkness. Orion, Elora, and Corinne moved in silence, the sound of their boots muffled on the soft earth. They stopped near a cluster of low rocks, half hidden by the tall grass. From here, they could see the road stretching into mountains, the route that would take them beyond the court's reach. Elora sat on one of the rocks, her breath steady but her eyes watchful. "They'll send riders," she said quietly. "By dawn, they'll be on this road." Orion nodded. "Then we need to decide now who's going with us and who isn't." Corinne leaned against a boulder, his arms crossed. "Funny, I was thinking the same thing." Orion's gaze was hard. "You've been leading us with one hand on the map and the other reaching for the ring. I don't travel with people I can't trust." Corinne's smirk was thin. "You think I dragged you through half the city for nothing? I kept you alive. I opened the way under the wall. You'd be dead without me." Elora's voice cut through the tension. "And now you expect payment for that? Is that all you are?" Corinne didn't answer right away. His eyes shifted to the small metal case in Orion's coat. "That gem could buy freedom 100 times over." Orion stepped closer, his tone firm. "This ring isn't about freedom you can buy. It's about a promise I made before the war ended. One thing I said I did no matter how long it took." Elora's gaze softened slightly as he spoke. Corinne's didn't. He pushed away from the rock and took a slow step forward. "Then hand it over, Captain. You can keep your promise without the stone. I'll make sure it's put to better use." Orion's voice dropped lower. "The only way you're taking this ring is over my body." The two men stood in the moonlight, the air between them tense and cold. Elora rose to her feet, stepping between them. "This ends here. We either walk away together, or we don't walk away at all." Corinne's eyes flicked to her, then back to Orion. For a moment, it seemed like he might push the fight further, but then his smirk returned, weaker this time. "You're both a waste of a good deal." Without another word, he turned and started back toward the city, his silhouette shrinking into the night. The silence he left behind was heavy. Orion let out a slow breath, then reached into his coat. The small case opened with a soft click, the ring catching the moonlight. He held out to Elora, his voice steady. "I didn't cross battlefields and borders just to give you a gift. I came because this means I'm not leaving again." Her eyes shimmered. The faint glow of the crystal reflected there. "Orion, the court will never allow this." "They can try to stop me," he said, a faint smile on his lips, "but I've faced worse." For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she extended her hand. The cool metal slid onto her finger, the crystal glowing brighter as it touched her skin. Somewhere far off, the faint call of riders carried on the wind. Elora glanced toward the road, then back at him. "Looks like we'll have to run again." Orion smiled, and for the first time in years, it reached his eyes. "Then let's run together." They turned toward the dark line of the mountains, the grass whispering around them as they moved. Behind them, the city lights faded completely, swallowed by the night, and ahead, the promise they both held on to finally had a future.